Good, good morning. Wasn't prepared to use a microphone, but that's okay. Welcome to the session on showcase production or showcase selection. What we're going to do today is talk a little bit about what the whole thing is, because I think a lot of people who are kind of either new to the association or whatever, are a little bit have some struggles sometimes learning how the best way to submit. And myself and Tiffany have done this for the last couple of years. It doesn't matter if you want to close it. Have done this for the last couple of years, and through our going through multiple showcase selections and watching videos, what seems like hundreds of times, even though it's not hundreds of times, we've seen some things and we've seen some trends, and want to share them with you so hopefully that you can get the best submission possible. Ultimately at the end of the day, the goal is not to make sure that only certain type of acts get on the stage. Our goal, at least from our perspective and our other team member who's on maternity leave, is to make sure that everybody gets an equal opportunity and they submit the best thing that they can so that they know that the committee is going to look at them the best. So with that in mind, we'll start with introductions. My name is Rich Ramos. I'm the Associate Dean of Students at Simpson College in Indianola, Iowa, as well as working on the showcase team with Tiffany and Megan Haberman, like you said, who's on maternity leave.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tiffany Clayton. I am the Assistant National Showcase Selection Coordinator, and I am the Director of Student Involvement and Leadership and Coordinator of Multicultural Programs at Albright College in Reading, Pennsylvania. So, like Rich said, we're going to go through the process of showcase selection to kind of give you an overview of actually what happens in the room and give you a bit of tips and tricks, we'll call it, of how to submit your best self. Okay, so the committee makeup. So an application goes out to pretty much any NACA registered student, faculty, whoever is on their mailing list. And the committee is always comprised of at least 5 to 6 committee members and 1 coordinator. The coordinator is a part of either the regional planning committee or the national planning committee. And then the coordinator actually is the one to pick the students. So they like to have more students than anything else. At least 50% needs to be a student. And then faculty, staff, professional staff, and maybe a grad student as well. And grad students are counted as professional staff as well. So professional staff is usually like advisors, directors, anybody like student activities in that type of realm. So the committee is chosen, and again, if it's a regional committee, then they should be in the region that they're associated with. If it's a national committee, it should be from across the board. The committee, we always try to diversify the committee as much as possible. So small schools, representation from small schools, big schools, larger budgets, smaller budgets. We want to have as much variety as possible because everybody has different needs and wants. So once the committee is selected, they're notified. They come to wherever the destination is that they're going to be having the showcase selection meeting. And from day one, they start with reviewing videos. Anything else for the committee makeup?
I don't think so. I think that's pretty much so it. I think the only thing to remember is, like Tiffany said, at least half of those people on the committee are expected to be students. For the regional conference, the makeup of the committee needs to be no more than 6 people, and for the national convention, it's no more than 8 people. And so that you understand that meeting time is usually for the regional conference 3 or 4 days, and for the national convention, it was about 6. Straight. 6 consecutive days, and sequestered in a room. It's almost, sometimes it feels like we're selecting a pope, but sequestered in a room, watching videos and making decisions.
Nobody's remote. You're all traveling to stay.
No, everybody is traveling in to stay. They're staying together. We're eating together. We're doing everything together. So it's a really cool experience because you get to know some of those students really well, and you get to know some of the staff. But the realities is some of that staff, it's like herding cats sometimes. And the attention focus gets a little bit hard, but that's why we're there, is to kind of help maintain that focus and to keep them directed on the task at hand.
And kind of going into that, so I told you about the general committee setup. I didn't tell you exactly what me and Rich and Megan actually do when we're there. So we're there to support the actual coordinator. So the showcase selection coordinator is actually the person who runs the meeting and who does that's the person who will email you after you submitted a showcase and maybe you didn't get selected, and you have questions and you want to talk to somebody about that. The coordinator is the person who's your primary contact. Me, Rich, and Megan are there to support the coordinator, so that way, if things go wrong, if we need to contact the NACA office for anything like that, we're there to support them, which is making sure that everything runs smoothly and efficiently across all regions and nationals. So we're going to go into voting. So once the committee is situated, they had a little orientation about what to expect. We go over the rounds. So there are 3 rounds. The first round, the committee will watch all of the videos. So let's just say it's 500 videos. They'll go through all of the videos, and we go by random order for each category. So the categories are roving, club, lecture, spotlight high, spotlight low. Yeah. So and we said it. So
Roving,
sampler. Okay.
MC. There's several categories, and again, National Convention has slightly different categories, but they're all pretty much the same.
Yeah. The only thing that's different about nationals is that lecture is actually done separately because it's just so many submissions. They're already watching 500-600 videos. Lecture would just they would be there for like 2 weeks. So that's the only thing that's a little different. So with round 1, we go through by category, and then we pick a random letter to start with each category. So that way no one can say, oh, by the time they got to the C's, they were bored or something like that. We just pick a random letter. And the committee will watch 90 seconds. And let's just say at the 90-second mark, somebody needed to hear a little bit more. They can watch up to 2 minutes, but no more. There's only a 2-minute limit. 2-minute limit for round 1. In round 1, for lecture, they get to watch up to 3 minutes because submissions are a little longer. Voting should only be based on the materials provided. So there's a very strict rule that the committee cannot watch off-brand like YouTube videos, or if they've heard of the performer before, they can't be like, oh yeah, they were on whatever. You're only focusing on what's being submitted. Okay. And they're also not comparing acts. So like, let's just say we see 15 comedians. They can't say, oh, well, so-and-so was better than that. I want to change my vote. No, you're just voting on whether that whole 90 seconds or 2 minutes was pretty good or something you might want to say or mildly entertaining. And 50% of the vote needs to pass.
And I think the thing to remember about round 1 too is that there's, like Tiffany said, they're not comparing, they're not looking at this actor, that they're looking at the materials, but there's also no conversation. There's no discussion about anything that they see. So it's purely a very cursory, just you're doing some initial screening and you're making decisions. As much as I'd love to say that they're going to watch all of the videos, the realities are is 90 seconds or 2 minutes is not a lot of video. So as you all as associates trying to submit, you need to cram your best stuff into that 90 seconds or 2 minutes. Occasionally we'll see somebody who, the times when they typically ask for 2 minutes or they ask for that extra 30 seconds is when I've seen it happen with like either a slam poet, a speaker, or a magician, because they get right to that minute and a half and they haven't either finished a trick or they're on a like right about to get to the key point of their poem or whatever, and it just stops. And it's a cold stop. It's not a, hey, we're about ready to stop. It's a cold stop. And that's when they'll want to extend it. So typically those are the ones we typically see get that 30 seconds extra. But it really varies from committee to committee.
Cold stop as
It's just like, no, we stop it. There's a person who's, the selection coordinator is typically running that, and they stop it. Yeah, we stop it right there. Go ahead.
When you say no conversation, so then you don't have like advisors or whatever going, well, that was
No,
No.
not in round one. And
Yeah, so and we'll talk more about that. So
Yeah.
but like Rich said, so the coordinator will let's just say it's a YouTube video. You can see the timer marker. Side note, please add timers on the bottom of the videos if you can. That's really helpful. But if not, if there's no timing on the video, we have a phone and we'll just like do like a clock thing. It's not the end of the world. It's just really helpful. But as soon as they get to that 1:30, it's always pretty much perfect on 1:30. Okay.
And then is it pass fail at this point, like yes, no?
It's a pass fail. So the grid, everybody has like it's an Excel form, and there's a guy who's significantly smarter than me or Tiffany or Megan who understands conditional formatting. It's a really complex Excel form that does all the math and everything for us. So when a committee member votes, they vote like 1 for yes, 0 for no. That calculates that into the 50%. If for some odd reason we have a committee member who gets sick and needs to leave, the form is set up so we don't have to worry about taking that person out. It just automatically calculates 50% of who's there. But then it also tells us automatically who's passed and who's failed. And it basically does all the work for us throughout. It does the random letter generation. It does a time calculation so we know about approximately how much time we have left in each particular round. But it's a great form, and it expedites the process a little bit, but it also prevents, years ago, it used to be you had to hold up a paddle to say, I'm voting for Rich Ramos, or I'm voting for Tiffany, and in some cases, I think that was also a time where people were able to intimidate each other and like, you need to raise your hand. This way, it's a purely individual thing. Every person in the room has their own computer that they're working off of, and they vote, and there's no intimidation factor. Once they vote, we lock it in, so there's no changing their vote. They can't go back later and change it. They vote for artist A, it puts it in their category, we take that category, we paste it into a field, it locks that in, that vote is done. There's no changing it from that point on.
Okay, so round 2. So once we get to round 2, now the committee is able to compare. Also, we'll go through the ones that pass. So in round 1, let's just say out of the 500, 150 passed. We'll go through and re-vote on them. Because now we can actually compare. We can have conversations. We can say, oh yeah, so-and-so was really, that one joke, that's a killer, and everybody laughed. They definitely need to move forward. And then they only review the video if they need it. So throughout the entire round 1, we tell them, take detailed notes. We also, on our Excel sheet, we take notes as well, just so that way, just in case everybody's notes aren't the same. But, it gets, after a while, and you've seen so many videos, people kind of start to blend together a little bit. So taking notes is really helpful, even if it's just like to say, it was that one joke where everybody laughed about the Muppets or something like that. Acts may be moved to different categories during this round. So, when you're submitting, you have the option to acts to be placed in multiple categories. And sometimes somebody may say, oh, I want to submit as an MC, but the committee may say that, oh, they might be better as like a spotlight low. We want to give them a chance and maybe not as an MC. So it's actually helpful when acts submit to multiple categories because you never know where you may be moved to. No, it depends on your type of entertainment. So like a lecture or motivational speaker is probably only good for lecture. There's a very slim chance you'll actually end up on, main stage.
I mean, it's happened, but it's pretty infrequent.
Yeah, it's pretty infrequent. But like if you're I'll say comedian. If you're a comedian, you have a better chance of going to more categories than, let's just say, a lecturer. But like if you're a roving artist, I mean, if you're going to be doing stuff a plush or something like that, you're not going to be on main stage for 10 minutes. You know what I mean? You only have like one category that you'll be a good fit. So make sure that it's just relevant to whatever your area is.
And as a motivational speaker myself, I've got a lot of other questions. Do you mind if I just talk to you later so I don't occupy the time here, or is it cool?
Sure. Yeah, we'll be around. We'll be around. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so round two, again, it's more discussion based, and now we can talk a little bit more freely about what we just saw.
And please don't think that we rush people through this. Round one, because there's no conversation, it flows a lot faster. Round two, we want to encourage discussion and to talk about things, and to the best of our ability, we want to make sure that we prevent anybody's personal biases from coming into this discussion, and we want them to focus purely on what they're seeing on the screen, because it's to no value if they're sitting there going, well, we had this person on our campus and they were great, or they sucked, or whatever. That doesn't do anybody any good. So we're really careful about monitoring the conversations to ensure that that stuff doesn't come into the conversation. We're basing it purely on what they say. Now, what is going on in their head, unfortunately, we can't control, but we do our best to make sure that doesn't happen.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Because it's just a review video only, and it would just be going over what you've already seen. But
Correct.
You're not furthering in round two at all.
No. Correct.
So, yes and no. So, when you're submitting, you have the option to submit multiple videos. So for round one, we only typically watch the first video link. Now, if for some reason that the video link isn't working, but the second video link is working, we'll watch that and consider that your first link. In round two, if the committee wants to see more, we might go automatically to that second submission link. But again, we will never watch any more than 2 minutes for round two.
So, just that idea of links A and B or whatever. So, is that something you can do in terms of submit some, alternate links just in case one that isn't?
Absolutely.
That is the best thing you could do. Yeah, that is.
How many?
I think the form has like three.
Yeah.
Basically three.
Yeah.
If I recall right. There may be more. And we can
It's
try to
no
look
more
at the
than
office
4,
to
yeah.
see, but typically we don't do it. The other thing that we see it fairly frequently is that we have folks who will either upload it to a Dropbox or someplace like that, or it's a YouTube video, but they forget to unlock it. So it's key to make sure you unlock it, because while the community, we're slow and want to be careful about how we do stuff, unfortunately we need to keep moving. And so if a video is locked, we'll reach out to you as soon as we know it, but if we can't get it unlocked, we're going to move on. And, my apologies for that, but it's a long process, and we have a limited amount of time to get through that information. Yeah.
Should the video links be to definitely separate videos, or should it be 2 links to the same? You know what I mean? Like one on the video.
It's better if you have different types of content. Well, different things, because they want to be able to see as much. They're trying to make the best judgment based on what they have. So, for instance, if it's a band, if your first link is your professionally made video, your second link should definitely be some sort of live version, because variety is key, and they want to be able to see what you look like on stage, because you're going to be performing on stage. So variety is always best.
Is there a preference as to which of those two examples should be first?
It's kind of a crapshoot.
Yeah,
I'd love to say after my first year into this, I did, trying to think how many. So I think my first year of doing this position, I did 4 or 5 showcase selections in that year. My second year, I did like 3. And there's no set, everyone is slightly different because it's not the same people in each region, which also makes it a little bit challenging. I'd love to say that this formula works for everywhere across the country, but it doesn't, because every region has their own dynamic. Every region has the type of thing that they're looking for. It's a little bit different. So unless you've seen something different,
and
Tiffany.
every region has different submissions as well. So, even though some may submit to all regions, every region has different submissions. So certain things work for certain regions and other things just don't work at all. So, variety is key. Okay. All right, round 3.
If one link doesn't work, maybe they.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely, if it's the same video, but it's just in a different place, so like it's on YouTube and Vimeo and something else, that's fine. If you only have one video, don't feel like you need to make multiple videos. If you have it, awesome. But if you don't, it's not the end of the world. Round 3 is kind of like a hybrid sort of thing. It's a little mix of round 1 and round 2, and then a little bit something different. So in round 3, basically what happens is everybody who's made it into round 3 from round 2, the committee is going to rank order them. So we know, for example, for Spotlight High in a particular region, we're choosing 25 acts. The committee is going to rank their top 25 acts in that category. Individually. It's not like a group conversation, individually. So what we'll typically do is, okay, here's all of the talent, here's what you need in each one of the categories. Take the next 2 or 3 or 4 hours, go wherever you need to with the laptop and do your rankings. And once they're entered, then what we do is we take those rankings, we calculate the scores. So it's when they're ranking, if you're the number 1 choice by everybody, you're going to get the highest number. So it's kind of a backward sort of thing. So if you're number 1, you're not going to get number 1. If you're number 1 in Spotlight High, you're going to get 25. So you got to look at them as points, and you want the most points. And so what will happen is we'll take those points, we'll calculate the scores, and at that point, then we determine who gets, essentially, at that point, gets a showcase. But the realities are, of the way the association is laid out and the way showcasing is set up, is that it also breaks down to agencies and how many acts an agency has and the diversity on the showcase and everything else.
In what sense?
So like an agency can only get 3 showcasing acts and 2 alternates. And there are some agencies here, as you may have already seen, who have hundreds of acts or whatever. And they'll submit, like for example, I can tell you that CAA for the National Convention, they submitted 42 submissions. Well, they're not going to get 42 submissions. Even if every single one of those acts were phenomenal, they're not going to get 42 submissions. They're going to get I think the National Convention is 4 and 3. That's all they're going to get. So that means that if those 40 acts made it all the way through to round 3, they're actually only going to get 7 of them through. So we're going to be throwing out 40 or 33 of their acts, and we have to put somebody else in. And that may be somebody who made it to round 3, but if we didn't have the numbers of people make it to the round 3, we're going to go back, and as we refer to it, we're going to bring them back from the dead. And it may be just about anybody. And we'll go back and we'll review. You look like you have a question.
If you go back to round 2, people eliminated. If you go back to round 1.
If we need to go back to round 1, we will. We prefer not to,
Okay.
but if we need to, we will.
So round 3 is then when like the diversity of act.
Diversity and diversity of agency really come into play. On this form, so that you know that I was talking about with the voting, it helps us a lot because it also tracks agency submissions and how many each agency has. So we can see that the CAA submitted 40 and they got 40 through, and it'll highlight and say, you have a red flag here. There's too many of their acts that made through. And so we have to resolve it until the colors go right to the right color. I think the color is blue. It turns to when it's okay. But we need to resolve that before we can move on to the next act.
But you guys will not know for the first 2 rounds.
No.
that CAA submitted 40.
Oh no.
No, we do know that they've submitted 40, but we don't tell the committee where they are. It's none of their business.
Judging have no idea.
Yeah, it's not for them to worry about whether CAA had 40 make it through. It's not their issue.
It's really, they're really just focusing on the content. Round three is when we start getting to the nitty gritty. So we give them the opportunity to come up with their dream showcase, but with the rankings. And then once it's inputted in, that's when we get into the nitty gritty of, okay, CAA has 40 submissions or 40 ones that went through. This is not going to work. Let's talk about quality. Let's talk about diversity of acts. If CAA, the 40 that submit, the 40 that were ranked, that were all comedians, obviously that's not going to work. So let's figure out who we're going to take out. So diversity of acts, diversity of, have they been to a lot of showcases? Have they showcased a lot? Who do we maybe want to give some independent artists a chance? it have those types of conversations so that way we can be as well-rounded and as balanced as possible. So that way each showcase as unique as the last one.
How do you keep track of that in terms of how many times an artist or an actor showcased already in years past?
The only concern from our standpoint is if they showcase in that region the year prior. Now I know that there are people that submit. I've been doing this for a long time. I've been in the association volunteering for 30 years or whatever. I know I look really young. But I know it's scary. I look really good for my age. But the realities is I know that there are people who've showcased a lot. And I know that there are people who have showcased in a lot of different regions, a lot. But it's not for me to say, hey, this person has showcased a lot. Our only concern is if they've showcased in that region the year prior.
But there is on the form that's submitted and that we actually can see, it does say the amount of college dates that the artist has. So some say 2, some say 0, some say 150. They can notice that, and most times it's not a big deal unless again we're in round 3 and we're really trying to figure out who might be best fit for this particular showcase.
In theory, people don't submit if they were showcasing at.
Yes.
Right.
Showcase last year, I'm not going to submit to that region.
Right.
But
Right.
sometimes maybe we forget it. Then we
Yeah, and
Slip through.
yeah, but we also have a separate sheet. The coordinators have a separate sheet that can compare. Because sometimes, if you were at that conference the year before, you'd be like, that person looks oddly familiar. And there's been a few slip ups, but most likely we catch it before.
Yeah, I think we've caught every single one. But it's like we'll get to it and we'll start to watch the video. It's like, wait, yeah, no. And then we pull up the list from the previous years, like, oh, no, they showcased. And then we contact the office and say, hey, they showcased. The office also tries to check that as well. So they double check it, too, to make sure that somebody hasn't showcased. And, it's human error, unfortunately. And when you're dealing with hundreds of submissions for each region, it gets a little bit hard. So now we'll talk a little bit about some of the specifics about what's kind of looked at. So these are things that we've talked about and every committee has talked about after we've done regions in the last 2 years where we've noticed specific things. So one of the things clearly is the timing of the video and the content quality. So first off, the video quality is super, super important. I think sometimes what happens with like comedians or speakers or just about anybody is they'll have their buddy who's in the back of the room on their cell phone recording it. If it's noisy like what's going on in this other room and you're still trying to capture this information, there you go. He's probably sitting there going, oh God, I hate this. But what's going to happen is it's going to be problematic and it's not going to be the best submission that you really want to put in there. So be aware of that. I understand that it's cost prohibitive to submit a high quality video. I get it. And I respect that, but just be cognizant of what you're doing. And pay attention to the length. I mean, the length is important. I think some people forget about it and forget what it is. If it's a live performance, don't try and fake it lip syncing and do that sort of stuff because surprisingly, these committee members are more astute at that and they'll notice that stuff more so than I would have ever thought. So they pay attention to things. In one of the video submissions we had this in January in Northern Plains, they noticed that the person was doing it by themselves with a phone on a tripod because they could see the shadow of the tripod in the sun. And not that made a difference, but they commented on it because they noticed those things. And so it's weird. Yeah.
With 80% of Hollywood, I'm not going to raise the level, 80% does ADR, this voiceover after the fact, does it so far to capture great audio?
Yeah.
If what we're submitting is I want a live performance in every category, why is that not paid attention to then this audio quality thing? Because we're not necessarily the producers of the performance, so why is there so much focus on the actual quality of the audio? I mean, as long as you can hear it, though. I'm not saying audio is not important. sounds like there's a lot
I-
of emphasis on the production quality.
I think that students are able to pick up that things sometimes recorded in a studio are truly not a true representation of that particular artist.
Okay.
Is yeah, that you're faking it, or that it's been auto-tuned or whatever. They want to hear, if there's a singer that's on stage, they actually want to hear that singer's voice. They want to know it's a live performance.
But they want to hear the singer's voice. They don't want to hear the crowd, in the background. Like they want to hear what they're going to hear on stage. So that's the most important thing. High quality is great, but again, it's really about, they want to be able to envision you on stage and what you're going to sound like or what you're going to look like. So yes.
Oh, sorry, just along those lines then, given keeping the 90 seconds in mind. So if the top 90 seconds of your song is 30 seconds starts, 30 seconds in, is that all right? I mean, can you just do
Yeah.
that, or do people judge that negatively?
No, that's actually perfect. If let's just say you're submitting a YouTube link, and that link starts at a certain point, and that's your best part. Let's just say you're a band, and your first minute is just a guitar riff or something like that. Not really helpful. But if you get to like the lyric part, much better, much better.
And if you know that there's a part of your song that's like killer, that it's just like, in your shows, you've seen that's when people really totally get engaged into what you're doing, then put that in there. It's kind of, you kind of got to think to what people are looking for in your performance, and where you've seen that crowd interaction kind of get, that interest really get piqued. That's where it kind of jumps in. I think sometimes happens, mostly with musicians, is that what they're putting on the screen should match what they truly do in a show. Sometimes we'll have musicians who they're really a coffee house act, but they have a video or something with a full band, and nothing shows that they're coming with a full band. And that sometimes impacts what the group is looking for, because if they're looking at the price and they see that the video, so it's an acoustic singer who is wanting $5,000 for a performance, but the video shows her with a band, and then they go, wait, it's just one person, I'm paying $5,000 for it. Am I really getting my money's worth? Does this make sense? That is sometimes problematic and causes a little confusion in the group.
Then also, so where it says video submissions are better than audio submissions, if you are a band, sometimes they upload like SoundCloud clips. That's fine, but that may not want to be your first link. If we can actually see you and live, if possible, or a nice video, that works out better. SoundCloud might be better as like a second or third link, just as additional thing, but they kind of want to see you because, again, they need to be able to envision you on stage. So we want to see the performances. So again, we're talking about they want to be able to see you. Your time is limited, so you don't really need to talk about, hey, I was born and raised and blah, blah, blah. I love singing since I was 2. That's all fine and good, but that shouldn't be the majority of your submission. Your submission should be about content. We don't care if you're funny unless you're a comedian. So again, if you're focusing on music, be about music. If you're focusing on comedy, be about comedy. Your biography, we can read that in your submission. Okay? Your submission should not include clips of you setting up or sound check. We've seen videos where it's just basically you're just wasting our time. And again, we're going through hundreds of submissions, so focus on what really matters. If you have to submit something that requires, an explanation prior to the actual performance, figure out how to way to do it so that way we're not as distracted, but we still see more of who you are supposed to be and who you're supposed to represent. The interviews part, that's actually interesting because it's really confusing, because if you're on a talk show and you're talking about what you're supposed to be doing, but we don't actually see what you're supposed to be doing, again, why? There's no purpose in that. So show us what you have so that way we can figure out where you may be a good fit, So focus on content.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times people want it in the videos with the introductions piece, make sure the committee kind of knows them and feels good. That is not going to impact. They don't care. I mean, and that sounds really harsh and cold, but in honesty, they're there to make a decision, and you talking about how much you really want to come and play at their college doesn't matter. I can tell you, probably at Northern Plains when we did selection, there were probably at least 3 or 4 acts that the first minute, 15 seconds were just an intro on how much they really want to come and play at your college. And I can tell you that none of those acts made it through. It's not important.
Do you care if they've been on The Voice or America's Got
No.
Talent? Do you want to hear any of that pedigree?
No. Well, I mean, we do, but it's
We don't need to see,
Blake Shelton giving a review.
yeah, like we don't care. Like
It doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
Blake Shelton.
Like, or like on The Voice, or like if someone submitted to like a popular television show, we want to see you on a television show doing whatever you're supposed to be doing. But we don't need to see the reactions. We don't need to hear the commentary about so-and-so thought you were so great. We think you're great too, but we just want to see the content.
And I think also, too, when you're doing that, I think some people will flash on the screen the intro to The Voice, the video, whatever it is, the splash screen, and they'll do the splash screen of AGT and all that sort of crap. That eats up your time. That doesn't gain anything. If you're going to do that and you've been on one of those shows, great, but put it as like a crawl, or put it as you're performing, put it as like, put the AGT logo on the screen, but you're still performing. So they're not losing it. But those things really don't necessarily have an impact on the selection. There are people that have been declined because they've been on anything. It doesn't matter if they don't see the content of what you do. So we talked a little bit about this. Bands should provide at least 30 seconds of live content so that they can see it. One thing I've noticed in the last couple years, or the last 2 years, and probably more recently this year than ever before, be cognizant of where that live video, if it's in a bar, beer bottles, or it looks like it's a party or whatever, more than likely the group will decline it. And it's weird. You would think that this age demographic would not be that uptight about it. They do. I was really, really surprised when there's at least 1 or 2 videos that I saw, I think from national conventions, like, oh, that was shot in a bar. That was, there were a lot of drunk people, or there was a lot of beer bottles. They were a little uncomfortable about it. So just keep that in mind. See, the looping piece. If you loop as a solo artist, some people have submitted band videos as opposed to the looping piece. Make sure they do that. I also understand that looping artists, sometimes it takes a lot to set up that looping. If there's some way that in the editing process you can shorten that, set up the whole loop, because I think sometimes, I get that looping is a complex sort of thing, but you really, again, you got to remember, you only have a minute and a half, and you're spending all your time setting up the loop, and they're actually only seeing 15 seconds of the looping song itself. You're shooting yourself in the foot. And lectures, submit clips of you lecturing on the topic. The lecture piece is, if you're not lecturing on the topic that you're looking to present, then that's also going to go, because they're going to read your elevator pitch. And if it doesn't match, they're going to not understand. Likewise, it goes back to the interviewing. You can be interviewed by whatever TV media, whatever sort of thing. And if they're still not seeing what you're supposed to be talking about, it's not going to help you get on a showcase. It's not going to matter if Jimmy Kimmel interviewed you or Anderson Cooper interviewed you about what you do if they really can't see you doing your thing.
So avoiding distractions. So this is really important. The committee, again, is comprised of very astute people and observant people. So think about the things that you wear. Are you wearing clothing with messages that may be offensive or distracting? Or are you not clothed appropriately. Those things really matter because, again, they have to be able to see if you're going to fit in with their college and at the showcase. Don't sit so close to the camera when you record your submission. Again, they want to be able to see you, but they want to be able to see that you're taking it seriously and you're being professional with it as well. Avoid background music, especially for non-music acts. We've seen like comedians who like they have music blaring in the background and we can barely hear the jokes. Like that's not helpful at all. Also, as like a side note, sometimes with it's like for comedians, they may be coming out to like a nightclub and then they actually show the person being introduced. We don't care about the introduction. We need to see your content. You don't have to include your agency information. We have all the information about you, your bio, your elevator pitch, how much you're going to cost. We already have that information. You don't need to, reaffirm that in your video. Avoid using a platform to submit your video that uses ads. So if it's something where it's from, let's say like a NBC or something like that, and you were trying to showcase that you were on some show, most times we have to wait, on that particular site for whatever NBC's, ads are. It just takes up time. Again, the ads don't take away from your minute and a half. That doesn't count.
But it distracts the committee.
It just distracts us. Like, okay, like we have to wait for this.
Well, if it's a YouTube video that, if it's a YouTube video that the ad will pop up before your spot is done, you know how like there's some that it gets like a minute in, it's like, oh, your video will continue after that. If it's one of those, then yeah, don't use it.
All of YouTube's going that way now.
Yeah, and I don't know what the timing is on YouTube, how far into a video it is when they kick that piece in.
They study you and how long you've been watching other videos. So
Okay.
it's person dependent.
So yeah, I would avoid that if at all possible. And if you're that person where you know that it kicks in, I mean, you all know your videos and your talent better than I do. So if you know that YouTube is one of those ones where it kicks in your act or your video pretty quickly, then I would avoid using it.
Can I ask about the background music? So
Yeah.
we submit like for our balloon guy.
Yeah.
Do you want voiceover? Does that like while they're doing their thing, running dialogue behind? Or I think we usually put music behind it because it's awkward
Yours is different.
Yeah.
with roving. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
not
so-
you take the background.
No, it's if you're a speaking type of thing, then that makes a difference. But for like novelty acts, they can see what you're doing. They kind of get the point. They don't really need a whole lot of explanation for things like that. It's more for dramatic effect. But for comedians, like you don't need to hear music in the background. Just tell your jokes. Or for if somebody was doing like acrobats and music is fine for that. It's just background music. But again, let it be relevant. It has to be relevant. Okay, so details matter. Spell your act's name correctly throughout your submission. Sometimes we'll get in the application, it says your name is spelled Jake, but then on your video is Jeke. What? Like, make sure you're just paying attention to what you're submitting on both ends. Pay attention to the year. That's one of our biggest pet peeves, actually, it's just videos that were taken 10 plus years ago, and the committee again is mostly comprised of college students who are not really familiar with shows like David Letterman and the Tonight Show with Jay Leno, and the video quality is usually
It's grainy.
grainy.
It's awful. And there is one act, and I'm not going to say their name, but there's one act that is submitted to practically every showcase selection, and we were talking about last night, that I can recite the video from heart, but it's a video from Jay Leno years and years and years ago, and they get knocked out the first round. And the submission is from somebody who should know better, but it's not going to be relevant, and they're going to know it's not. Even if you're still doing the same material you were doing back in 2000, right now, that's fine. Give it an updated video so that they can see you right now, not what you were in 2000.
So make sure that your link submission is accurate. we want to be able, again, to be able to match whatever you submitted in your application with whatever you're providing in your video link. So one of the examples was for like a band, if you're a solo artist, but then on your application you say that you're bringing 5 people, but we never see you with 5 other people, like as a band, then we're confused. Just questions. We don't like questions. Put your entire submission into one clip. We have to see 1.5 minutes of content. So if your first video is only 1 minute, we have to switch to your second video. Like that's kind of, it's weird because again, we're timing everything. And if your first submission is only 28 seconds and then we have to keep going through submission, like you're just taking up time. And again, we're watching hours of content. So we want to be able to see your best self in the first link. Looking at the rules and guidelines for each category, for instance, Roven doesn't allow electricity. So like if you submit something where you're going to need electricity, again, it's just questions we don't need to ask. And we're like, did they really pay attention to what they're doing? And we don't think you took it seriously. Include video submissions where you can actually see how long the video is. So it's easier for us to mark the time limit that we need. So again, we talked about that, like if it's a YouTube video, it already has a timer, but if it's something where we actually have to pull out our phones and like figure out how long the video is, it's annoying, but like we will do it. But again, just think about that as a helpful tip.
Now, YouTube burn-in is helpful, leaving a time mark before you enter somewhere.
Yeah, that's really helpful. It's very, very helpful.
Is that right?
A burn-in time marker.
Oh, right.
So, and I think that, you know, again, the details do matter, and it sounds like we're being kind of harsh and nitpicky, but the realities are when you're sitting in a room with these group of folks for 3 or 4 days, morning until nighttime, at some point you start to get really critical, and those little things do matter. Even when they're fresh, the little things still do matter, but as it gets later and later in the process, fatigue does play in. You can only watch 500 videos so many times. And to give you an idea how many are submissions, like Northern Plains was 330 some. National, I think, was 560 some-ish. So there's a lot of videos that they're watching in a relatively short period of time. So the fatigue piece does come into play. Yeah.
Go back to the point before about the audience noise.
Yeah.
So the point of my show is the response portion.
Oh, yeah.
Response.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it's kind of noisy when you hear the audience portion. Is there something you recommend
If
to clean it up?
Well, I mean, like if you can put like a lav on or something like that, so that's you're just taking a straight line out of whatever the sound console is, so that then we know that we're getting your clean vocal audio.
Well, actually, that's not the problem. It's the problem
Of the back.
audience sound. Sometimes, to me, it sounds like
If that's a part of your act, it's totally okay, and it's live. That's totally like hypnotists, mentalists, magicians, street magicians. Oftentimes, there's going to be background noise, right? And that's going to happen. And that's not a big deal because that's just a part of the show. But if you're a lecturer and there's a lot of chitter chatter in the background, or you're a comedian and it's sometimes I think in comedy clubs, you're hearing like somebody's videotaping from the bar and you hear like bar noises and stuff like that, that's remarkably distracting and will take away from what's going on the stage.
It's kind of this point even further, I mean, back to the idea of not lip syncing. If for some reason there's a little cut in the audio because audio is kind of crazy like that, is it still unacceptable to just do a lip sync over a very critical point? Otherwise you would have missed. For something that got blared out by background noise or whatnot?
So again, it's not. So again, we can't tell you exactly what to submit. But we can give you suggestions as to what they may pick up on. It doesn't mean that you're not necessarily not going to be chosen for that 10 seconds of like over lip syncing. But again, if you can just either cut it out or not do it at all, that might be best for you.
I think the other piece to keep in mind too is the realities is we're talking about most of the committee is made up of college students, and you got to frame your material for college students. If you have video that is in a comedy club that's all adults that are in 40 years old or whatever, they're going to notice. They noticed, honest to God, they noticed subtle crap that I never thought anybody would notice. And they notice the crowd. And if the crowd makeup is not that age demographic, they're going to notice it. And they're going to recognize it. And it'll stop them. Because they're going to go, well, this doesn't appeal to college students. It appeals to 50-year-old white guys.
And that includes the content too. So if you're, again, we're picking on comedians, if your only jokes are about your wife and kids, students don't have wives and kids, you know what I mean? So like they'll probably be like, well, it was funny, but students won't come to that for an hour show. So think about as much as you can in regards to like, is this going to be relevant? You don't have to be like super hip or like super modern on all the trends, but you should at least be thinking, will this appeal to someone between the ages of 18 and we'll say 24?
What other questions do you all have? And we're open. I think this says, but we'll talk to you however, and we'll answer whatever you want right now. It's an interesting process, and it's a long process. And I know that there are folks who, there are probably some agencies who don't feel like they want a lot of new folks in the thing. I'm of this mindset that competition breeds business. And I think it's important that we diversify and we have a lot of different people at the table and we have a lot of different people on the stage. Because that's the only way as an association I think we get better and see what's out there, new and different stuff. So I'm of that mindset, and I'm willing to help, and Tiffany is willing to help you all and anybody else get better at submitting their craft and doing the best possible. As much as I would love to say that all the changes are going to get you on the stage at some point, I can't guarantee that. My term expires actually on May 1, so Tiffany is going to take over. So, but my term expires, but I can't guarantee that that's going to happen. But I do, and I'm willing to help you do whatever you can to get the best possible. I've talked with a number of different folks and reviewed their videos, and we'll give honest feedback. Sometimes I'll be honest with you. I'm a pretty blunt person, so I'm going to pretty much put it out there, brutally honest. And if it hurts somebody's feelings, I really apologize, but that's just who I am. I was raised that way, so I don't have any control over that. Well, I could do, but I don't choose not to. But so please keep that in mind. We're here to help you have the best submissions possible.
In terms of hitting that 90 seconds or the 3 minutes of your lecture, I mean, cutting segments out and having to do cut scenes to get to the point faster, is that looked at
No.
as a negative thing?
No. It's great.
Awesome.
I would encourage it. Yeah. You had a question?
On that point, yeah. So I've taken this lecture before.
Yeah.
I try to just focus on a live stream of performance. And I think maybe, like, is it better to break it up into 30-second segments or just do one long?
It depends upon what you're doing. I mean, like, we'll both gladly look at your videos and give you some feedback based upon what we've seen over the last couple of years about what you could cut out. There's a magician who I know has submitted and has now gotten showcases, but sat down and chatted about what the video was and where there are things that that's just not going to appeal, or it's wasting time in your video and it's not getting to the point. So.
One of the other things you can also do is when you're actually on a college campus, talk to the students that maybe brought you there, or after the show when people come up to you and say, what was the best part of what did you most enjoy about my show? And, maybe go back and, if it's recorded, maybe take that clip based on feedback that you've gotten. Because sometimes I know that you may think that this may be your best bit, but students may think something differently. Because that's who you're going to be submitting to, is college students and their advisors as well. So, you got to be able to mix it up, but you also need to be able to, get feedback and take that feedback, and it might help you out in the long run as well.
You had a question?
Yeah, this is kind of complicated, but I want to try and make it as brief as I can. Given that this is the most cloak and dagger part of NAC for associates,
Yeah.
We can't,
Yeah.
even the leaders, people elected can't really see behind it. So, because you both have so much experience, what is the things that you would say that are the most subjective, that are the hardest to navigate from your side of the table, that may be helpful to us?
That's a good question.
That's a really good question, actually.
I think that One difficult part is knowing that the committee makeup is different every single time.
So there's a lot of luck involved.
There is a lot of luck involved, and some years you're going to get really mature students sitting around that table who are willing to look at things a little bit critically. Other years you're going to have students who are first or second year students who you're having to kind of babysit and kind of help nudge along and have to spend a little bit of time focusing them and making sure that they're paying attention and they're focusing on the right thing. So in some cases it's the luck of the draw, but some of the times it's just making sure you submit the right video and learning to play the region and play the game. I haven't had the chance to really run all the numbers, but there is, I want to spend a little bit of time with the numbers from the last 2 years and kind of do all the data to see, well, what's been getting selected, what hasn't been getting selected. I know that, like, what I've noticed just off the top of my head, I think South typically books, when I was there, they did a lot of slam poetry and they did a lot of country music. In Central, they were willing to venture out a little bit, and they even did some heavy metal and stuff like that. So it's a bizarre sort of mix. National Convention is a whole different beast altogether because there's so many acts in there. That's a little bit hard to choose which one would work here. So that's a tough question.
Have you ever walked out as professionals and said, I have no idea what these students are thinking?
All the time.
Oh, yeah.
All the time. All the time. And then the other thing is, again, not every artist submits to every region. So that's the hard part too. So, in Mid-Atlantic, we may get all singer-songwriters that are not necessarily country. We only get like 3 country bands. But again, in the South, that's probably the majority of what they get. So it's kind of hard to say, what's going to fly and what's not going to fly. But, that's where the round 3 comes into play in regards to, like, we still have to diversify as much as we can based on what we have. So that makes it even harder when we only have so much to choose from.
And there are acts here even that are showcasing here that I can tell you, when I left the selection process, I was like, oh, why? Why? Why did we choose them? But it's not for me to put my personal opinion. I'm there to ensure the process goes smoothly. We're there to ensure that policies are held up and that it's a consistent process from region to region. And so that the same things are happening and there's not one set of rules going on here that aren't being applied here. But I know that there are acts that in every time I've done selection where I walk away going, oh, God.
Access to the selections.
Do you?
Yeah, I mean, given you're not going to stance on them except for the general players here, I'm kind of curious, do you have, as associates, access to those who were selected so we can kind of learn from the video submissions?
Yeah, you can, like, in your program book, you can see everybody who's selected. So, yeah, like all the showcasing acts are in there.
Not the acts themselves, but the actual videos that they submitted. So
No, I don't. Currently there isn't. I mean, you can probably Google it and search it. Sometimes some agencies have them listed on their website, the videos on their websites. No, there's no comprehensive listing, unfortunately. I mean, as much as I would love to be like, I'd love to be a completely open book and say, yeah, here it is. I also realize that there's got to be some respect for some acts, all that sort of stuff, and some may want them, some may think it's proprietary and you're just going to steal my stuff, that sort of stuff. So unfortunately, we don't share it. The other piece that we didn't talk about is the Showcase Selection Committee is anonymous. Excuse me. They're anonymous, and we want to make sure they're anonymous for a reason, because while you all may not do it, I know that there are people out there that will call somebody on the committee and say, well, why didn't you choose my act? And we want to make sure that they don't get in that position and don't feel like they're pressured because their act didn't get chosen for one reason or another.
So if you have further questions, we're kind of out of time, then thank you so much for coming. Also, if you want the PowerPoint, you can email me and then I can give it to you.
And don't hesitate to reach out at any time. Even though my time is up in May, thank you.
Just keep saying it.
Even though my time is up in May, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to talk to anybody. I'm happy to answer any questions. about anything related to the process. I think it's an important process, and I want to make sure it's fair and equitable for everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.